Well, I'm delighted to be able to introduce to you Pete Wurman. Pete joined Kiva in 2004 as a technical co-founder with Ralph De Andrea to help founder Mick Mounts bring his vision to life. In May of 2012, Kiva was acquired by Amazon.com. Prior to joining Kiva, Pete was an associate professor of computer science at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Pete's teaching focus was e-commerce systems, and his research focused on electronic auctions, especially combinatorial auctions, multi-agent systems, and resource allocation. Unfortunately, he never got to savor the fruits of earning tenure, as the Kiva opportunity had become too attractive, and he moved his family to Boston. Pete is still an adjunct professor at North Carolina State University. Pete earned his PhD in computer science from the University of Michigan in 1999 and his BS in mechanical engineering from MIT in 1987. University of Michigan, let's welcome Pete Wurman.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. I think we're going to see a video.
Yes. So before we start the interview part, I thought it would be useful if you got an idea what Kiva Systems was about. It turns out when you order something online, it's not magic that it shows up at your house. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to get that product delivered to you. Before Kiva, most warehouses had a lot of people walking around, picking stuff off shelves, taking it to some location where they put it in a box and ship to you. Kiva was an innovation on that, where we used mobile robots to pick up the products. We put them now on these shelving units, the blue things in the video. The robot can lift it off the ground, carry it to a station where the operators just stand all day instead of walking around. They're directed by the system through a series of lasers and rack lights, which are stationary lights on the shelving units, to pick products and put them in the boxes. And then once they've done that, they put, in this example, they push that box onto a conveyor and it goes to the shipping dock. Traditionally, the pick worker would spend about 2/3 of their time walking and walk something like 8 to 12 miles a day. With Kiva, they get to stay in one place. They spend all their time doing the productive part of their job instead of walking, and basically become about 3 times more productive. So the interface is very simple for the operator, the laser you saw, and that button that you push, and there's just a constant stream of robots bringing products by the operator. Pretty easy idea. So it was all the execution. The concept was great. It was how to build it.
So you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that's what you were going to become? I mean, was that a long-term aspiration for you?
There were a lot of points in my career where I did entrepreneurial things. When I was a grad student here, a friend and I started a company and we did some consulting. When I was a professor, I consulted with a startup company in Sweden that was doing internet auction-related things. So I had kind of dabbled in it on and off. I didn't really expect to do anything quite this big, though.
So a lot of the sort of entrepreneurial lore is littered with people that dropped out of college or never went at all. But you not only went to college, you went back and back and back again until you got your PhD. I guess the one thing you might have quote unquote dropped out of is tenure. But why, if you were doing these entrepreneurial things along the way, did you continue to pursue a course of study when so many don't?
The Kiva story kind of begins with the real founder of the company. His name is Mick Mounts. He was my roommate at MIT in our fraternity. And I dabbled in entrepreneurial things, but I wasn't really the person I didn't have the background to say, oh, here's a business problem, let's go solve it, because I'd spent all my time in the university. But through all these other activities, I had gained this kind of diverse and pretty effective background in solving technical problems and building very practical systems. And so when my friend Mick said, hey, I got this idea. Do you think we could build robots that could do this in a warehouse? I said, well, if you believe that there's a market for it, because that was his job, and we can find someone to build robots, because I don't know how to build robots, I can figure out how to coordinate them and make this whole building work together.
So he found another person who knew how to build
Right,
robots.
so the other person was Ralph D'Andrea, who was a professor at Cornell in control systems and was very well known because he had won the RoboCup competition 4 of the first 5 years.
And what's that?
RoboCup is an international competition to build robots that play soccer, and it's been going on for probably 20 years now. And there's the various iterations. He won in the small robot category, which involved building little robots about this big and playing on about a 20-foot field. More recently, it's turned to using kind of humanoid robots trying to play soccer. And you have 2 teams and you compete against the other teams.
So when you look at what Kiva Systems is today, today it's been acquired by Amazon.com, which is a pretty big deal. It's hard to sort of look back and realize there was a lot of trending happening in the space around 2000. I mean, you were starting something at North Carolina State called the E-Commerce Alliance, and Mick was a part of what became a storied failed venture, Webvan. So can you tell us a little bit about that moment in time and what was trending and the issue of timing?
Sure. So Mick's story was, after MIT, we went different ways. He worked for a while, then he went back to Harvard Business School and got a degree. And then he went to Silicon Valley and spent some time at Apple, and then went to Webvan, which was a San Francisco area startup that was trying to solve the grocery home delivery problem. So it was actually founded by Louis Borders, who's from Ann Arbor. So they raised $250 million, built state-of-the-art warehouse, and put groceries in it, and tried to deliver groceries to people according to the time that they wanted it delivered without melting the ice cream, and getting all the right products into the cartons, the totes that they were delivering to your house. And it lasted for about 2 years and went out of business. It actually IPO'd even in that time. At one point it was worth almost $1 billion. But it only lasted 2 years. And he had been hired into that to try to solve the operational problem in the warehouse because they weren't able to fill the orders efficiently enough.
Which translated means I'm sitting at home making an order online for Webvan, and it wasn't able to regularly get to me, or?
Well, it means the business plan called for them being able to, you're going to buy $100 worth of groceries. They're going to charge you $140. They want to be able to put the groceries in your cart and get it to you for under $20. Otherwise, they don't make money. Well, it costs $20 to put it into the totes in the first place, and it costs $20 to deliver it to you, and then it costs $10 more because they didn't do it effectively enough and the ice cream melted on the way, or they had the wrong kind of soup in the containers. And so people were calling back, and they had this group of support people that had to man the phones. So all those things, so they basically lost money on every order until they went out of business. And it was a very expensive warehouse to run in the first place.
So a company valued at one point at maybe $1 billion suddenly tanked because order fulfillment wasn't efficient and solved.
Right. And if you read about it online, it's kind of the poster child for the whole dot-com bust. It's one of the companies that raised the most money and went out of business the fastest. So that was a good learning experience for Mick. And that's how he got familiar with the industry and said, there's got to be a better way. And at the same time, robotics, these RoboCup things were happening, and there was a lot of innovation in the robotics field. The sensors were getting cheaper. Wi-Fi was becoming popular, which is how we talk to our robots. E-commerce was taking off, so a lot of people had to build warehouses. And filling an order for e-commerce is different because most fulfillment was really put a bunch of stuff in a tote and send it to a retail store where they're going to put it all on the shelves. So you're putting a lot of stuff into a lot of totes going to one location. E-commerce forces you to say, I got to get that one thing into this one box and send it to that one person. And it's a much harder problem than the warehouses were set up for. And that's kind of why the previous technologies failed and got Mick thinking about inverting the problem. Instead of sending the people to get the product, let the product come to the people, and maybe robotics was ready to tackle that.
So basically, Kiva is at least 3 integrated systems: Wi-Fi, which you talked about, digital cameras, and low-cost servers. But this low-cost servers, they do something called parallel processing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what that means and how that's important?
Sure. Well, I'd characterize it a little differently, but there's the hardware, the robots. That's one of the main components. And building reliable robots that can drive around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years, that's a big challenge. And then on the server is this complex software package that actually coordinates all the robots and figures out which station in the building should work on which order based on where the inventory is, and which robot should go fetch which of these inventory pods. We do use parallel processing in that, so the servers are pretty beefy, and we have some of the algorithms will look at the core and find out how many different threads can run at the same time and use them all to try to optimize the problem it's working on.
So what if does it ever happen that a robot, something falls off the cart and it's in the line of another robot? What happens in that kind of scenario?
Yeah, that does happen, unfortunately, because there's people involved. They don't always put stuff away correctly, or when they pick one thing out, they don't notice that the thing next to it moved a little and is sticking out of the pod. So things fall on the floor occasionally. The robots have sensors so that they'll see big objects on the floor, and they, for the most part, can kind of run through little objects and push them out of the way.
And they're communicating all the time back to these servers
Yes.
and notifying. So what's the value proposition ultimately to a company that is thinking about Kiva systems, like Zappos, for example?
Well, so we kind of liken putting in a Kiva system to doing a heart and lung transplant on your distribution center.
Just a minor surgery.
Yes, it's not something you do lightly, because if it fails, if you change a technology in your warehouse and it fails, you can't ship anything, and that's the lifeblood of your company. So, so it's a really big capital investment, and something companies do very carefully.
So how did you get your first customer? I mean, if it's such a big capital investment, it seems like there would have been a lot of reticence to sort of jump
There
on board.
was. Fortunately, one of the side effects of the way we've solved the problem is you can buy little ones and grow it incrementally. And so that video is actually from our first installation. It wasn't nearly as big as you saw in the video. The first one was in that same building. They gave us a corner and said, here's, I forget how much, 1,000 square feet, and we put in 20 robots and 2 stations and 100 pods. Now it's over 500 robots and a couple thousand pods and 40 stations, so it's much bigger now. And they were able to grow it incrementally and keep the rest of the building running while they experimented with this technology.
Who was that first customer?
Staples.
Staples. And how long did it take to prove out success at Staples and then get your next customer?
Well, Staples itself grew several times. So to convince them that it worked well enough to upgrade to another size and another size probably took a few months each time. Each size that they grew to was quite a bit bigger, so it was a bigger deal and took us longer to install it. It was another 1.5 years, I think, before we convinced our second customer, which was Walgreens, to buy a system.
So that's kind of, in relative terms, it's kind of a long time, especially for software companies, for example, that you can build out software and start getting customers in the dozens and hundreds even really quickly. So when you're seeking funding, where did you go to seek funding, and was that a barrier for funders?
It was. Nick actually, as I said, lived in San Francisco area, in Palo Alto, and when he thought of the idea, his first action was to go to the Silicon Valley venture community And they're all like, well, that's a really interesting idea if it works, but could you get someone else to build the robots and you guys just write the software? Because they're very software focused out there. And Mick's vision was, no, we want to control the whole experience. Nobody knows how to do this. We need to do both things at the same time. So the reason it's in Boston is because then he started traveling around to other venture areas and got much more reception in Boston for this complex hardware software product.
Immediately?
It did take a little while, but he got interest right away in Boston where he wasn't really getting the kind of interest in stuff.
And why do you attribute that success in Boston relative?
I think that community is just it's more common to do hardware projects out there. iRobot was out there, Boston Dynamics is out there. There's MIT spins off a lot of hardware-related companies. So it was just more common. They were willing to take that risk.
And at what point in this sort of process what year did you come into the company?
Technically, like 1983 when we met, but
so you had been maintaining the conversation with Mick for
the idea hadn't. We were good friends, and
yeah.
we saw each other every year, a couple of years, throughout that whole time. But when he came up with the idea in 2002 and told me about it in late 2002, I started working on it. And it wasn't until 2004 that he moved so that gives you an idea of how long it took, that he moved to Boston and we got our first round of funding. And even then the VC guys said, look, it's a great idea, and you got this guy Pete in North Carolina who sounds interested, and you got this guy Raph in Cornell, he sounds interested, but you guys haven't even been in the same room together yet. You got to meet and stack hands, like a huddle, or before we'll give you any money. So we did that. We ceremoniously stacked hands. And
did you move shortly thereafter? Or?
No, Raph was on sabbatical already, and I was going up for sabbatical the next spring. So he was able to move or live in the Boston area. I was teaching Monday night and flying to Boston on Tuesday morning and then coming back Thursday evening.
For how long?
I was able to drag that out for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to move to Boston until 2007.
2007. Was that a difficult decision, or was it sort of clear?
It was hard. It's hard to move your family. I have 3 kids, and one was about to enter high school. He might be in the audience.
He's a student here now.
He's a student here now. And so it's a hard thing to move kids at that age. But the company had grown. It seems small now, but I think we're at about 30 or 40 people, and we had a customer, so the risk was much minimized from when we started the company, and it was just 3 guys in a room with a silver box that had wheels but couldn't drive around.
Yeah. So the decision or the vision of Mick to have a wholly integrated system, hardware, software, sounds familiar. I mean, Apple's another company that does that. And you've,
yeah.
I think, said that your hero is Jonathan Ive
yeah.
of Apple.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the integrated system and why Jonathan is kind of important to you?
I've never met him,
Yeah.
but that would be fun. But I think for me, I relate to him because he's kind of the guy behind the scenes that makes it all work. And Steve Jobs was the visionary who had the ideas and set the high standards. And Jonathan was the person who figured out how to do it. There's thousands of people at Apple, so he's not the only guy, but he gets a lot of credit for kind of bringing it all together and unifying it.
And you see your role in
I
this
felt
company
like my role was
similarly.
kind of like that for Kiva.
And how many engineers or other staff were with you in the early days and then now?
Well, we started with 3. Once we got funding, we were able to hire another 3 engineers and 1 administrative assistant. And then it grew steadily over time. Now there's, I think, 450 people in the company as a subsidiary of Amazon.
So did you set out at the beginning to be acquired?
No. It was always an option, but the industry itself is very fragmented, so there's not a lot of big players who, like competitors of ours, who might say, let's buy Kiva. And so it turned out it was a potential customer of ours who decided we were so important to their business future that they would prefer to own us than to buy directly from us.
Is that customary, or is that sort of an unusual move on Amazon's part?
I think it's kind of unusual. They have acquired a fair number of companies, but no, they haven't acquired what's called a material handling vendor before, so we were the first one.
So when you're thinking about the decision of being acquired, was that a sort of slam dunk decision, obvious, yeah, let's do this, everybody's in agreement, full bore ahead, or was there considerable discussion and hand-wringing over, is this the right thing to do?
That happened at a level above me, so I can't really tell you what it was like. That's basically a board of directors decision, which is from the company, it's just the CEO and the CFO and the COO. And then the board of directors you've assembled to help you, give you advice. Who represent all the investors.
Did you have a view, though?
Well, I would say it's a very hard decision.
Yeah.
I mean, some companies, I think, it's obvious that that's the path, but we had kind of been marching towards an IPO, and that was our path at the time that this opportunity came up.
And was it just an opportunity that was unforeseen, came into the picture, or did you make a strategic about face going from an IPO to the acquisition?
I don't know all the details of how the conversations went, but I do know Amazon knew about us before 2004. Amazon was one of the companies that Mick went to in the early days and said, hey, I have this idea. Would you be willing to fund us, or would you be willing to buy one if we could build one and stuff? And so they kind of had tracked us throughout the company's history.
So now are you an employee of Amazon or Kiva, or how does that work?
Both.
So Kiva retains its identity under the umbrella of Amazon,
right.
but effectively you're working with Amazon. How is that for you?
It's a different environment to work in a big company. There's a lot of pluses, and there's a lot of things that change that make us do business differently. So I can't go into a lot of detail on
Yeah,
that.
sure, yeah. Well, so one of the sort of conversations out in the public square is, well, what's a long-term future for Kiva at Amazon, and what's the hopes, the value proposition for Amazon in that respect? Do you sort of foresee Amazon using this technology in other parts of its business, or how do you see that moving?
I can't really talk about Amazon's plans, but I'd say, they bought us for a reason, and time will tell how it plays out, but I suspect they did the right thing.
So would you consider yourself a serial entrepreneur?
No, because I've only really done one. I've advised a few companies.
So what's next?
I haven't figured that out yet. So I'll stay at Amazon for a while, make sure the technology is being used as well as possible, and if it's still interesting, I could stay there, or something else comes up. We'll see.
So do you have any words of advice for University of Michigan students that are thinking about sort of the decisions they make here relative to their future and entrepreneurship?
One of the things you said when you invited me was you liked the fact that I'm an example of someone who got an advanced degree and wasn't a person who had to start a company right out of college. For me, I think all the different things I did on the way to Kiva were all really valuable and ended up being important skills that I had learned that I was able to apply to Kiva. So, for example, I got my undergrad at MIT, which is a great school, and yet I didn't feel ready to get a job because I didn't feel like, as a mechanical engineer, I didn't feel like I really knew the field yet, so I came here to get a master's degree. And in the process, I got a job programming and then I got a job at the university for 5 years writing instructional software, which was used in some of the classes around here. And a lot of that was about user interface design. And I also got very familiar with programming. I got more and more deep into programming. Then I got a PhD in computer science, and particularly AI, which turns out to be very useful. And then I was a professor for a while. When it came to Kiva, I had experience building large systems. I had experience doing user interface design. So in addition to working on algorithms in the system, I was also helping design the UI and the touchscreen that you saw the operators use to make it super easy for them to do their jobs. I had done some stuff in databases. I had done all these different things along the way so that when you have a team of 4 people trying to build something that's complicated, you can do any part of it that needs to get done. And that's, goes from the simple stuff like UI design all the way into the most complex algorithms that we needed to build to make this thing work. So I guess my advice is you don't know where you're going. In no point in the past did I know we would start a company and build something as big and complicated as a Kiva system. But you pick what looks the most promising and most interesting, and you do that as hard as you can until the next thing comes up, change direction and do that. And like jumping from academics to Kiva was one of those points where, yeah, that was a great opportunity, and I decided it was worthwhile.
Well, thanks, Pete. I want to give a chance for some of the students to ask some questions, too.
Just a question about your business partner, Mick. I think he was your roommate. So over the course of since 1983 through the present day, what are the things you observe he does really well that you think were critical to getting where you guys are?
That's a really good question. So my role has been what's possible, how do we build it the best way, and focus on the technology. Mick's job is, as a business, what do we need to achieve? How do we convince people that this is going to work and they should buy one? And how do you motivate the team to get as much done as possible in a short amount of time? So he was really good at all of those things. A good example for us was he always insisted that we keep the demo system working. So in our small warehouse, originally our first building was like half the size of this room, and we had, part of it was dedicated to a very small demonstration system that had 20 inventory pods and the small silver robots that were the aluminum ones that we first started with. Even back then, we had to always have it working because you never knew when a investor might come by or a customer, he might be able to get a customer to come over. So keep the demo system working at all times. And he went beyond that. We didn't just put like we'd fill the system with fake inventory, but if we knew a particular customer was coming over, we'd actually take out all the other inventory and go buy stuff from their store, package it up, and put it in the pods as if it was their system that they were coming to look at. And so every time they walked in the building, when Walgreens walked in, all the pods had cosmetics or other Walgreens products. And when Staples walked in, there were Staples labeled staplers in the system. And that really impresses customers, that kind of attention to detail and effort to impress each and every one of them.
I'm just curious how much these systems cost and how soon do they break even for your customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they're multi-million-dollar systems. Small companies might buy $1 million or $2 million, and big facilities might buy $20 million. In all cases, the sales pitch is, this is a return on investment on something like the 2-year horizon. So they're spending a lot of money to make the workforce 3 times more productive. So there's a direct capital expense versus operational expense trade-off, and that has to work out to something like 2 years.
Looking at your video, there's still a human component in your model right now. Is there a time that you think that would be eliminated to make it more efficient, in which case all of your machines would just kind of put the products in the boxes themselves and ship them out themselves?
So you mean actually picking the product with robotic devices? Yeah, I think there is going to be a time. I think that's a very hard problem. A building like Amazon's has something like 1 million different products in it. So the vision systems that are needed to recognize and differentiate from among those million different things, and then the gripping or manipulation devices to be able to reach in and pick up any one of them and get it out without destroying or damaging or knocking out the rest of them. It's going to take 5 to 10 years or maybe 15 years before, is my view, and how long it will take to solve that problem. So we eliminated the walking. That was much easier to eliminate. The picking is a really hard challenge.
When your company is only 7 to 14 people, what was it like to develop the manufacturing for these advanced robotics?
There was a time when Mick and I, who were the least mechanical of the people, we were doing wiring while other people were doing the hard assembly. So early on, everyone pitched in, and if we actually, when we had our first pilot and we had to build 10 robots, everybody helped build them. And it turned out that at the same time we had to deliver the software, and that wasn't working either. So everyone was working all the time, and we hadn't even run the robots, the new robots with the software together before we showed up on site at the customer's pilot facility. So that was kind of scary, but it worked. And we stayed there, and we programmed every night and updated the software every day and made the system better and better while they watched day to day. You know, at that stage in the company, you're just doing whatever it takes to get things done.
University of Michigan, would you join me in thanking Pete Wurman?
Thank you.
For those of you who have specific questions of Pete, he'll be around for a few minutes afterwards. Thank you very much.